now time to meet our first speaker. Now, we first met Naomi Anderson-Subryan when she was a fresh graduate from Camberwell College of Art, and we got to know her wonderful work when we featured her as one of our graduates in 2019. Since then, it's been amazing, though hardly surprising at all, to see her go from strength to strength as brands and publishers have been drawn to her humorous, colourful, and beautifully crafted illustrations and ceramic creations. I'm very pleased to say that Naomi is now joining us as our first speaker of 2022. Hi, Naomi.
Hello.
How are
Hi,
you?
thank you for that introduction. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yeah, I see we're both dialing in from home, which is the new
Yes.
state of things. But it is great to see you, and thanks so much for joining us at Nice Tuesdays. Um, I'm now going to hand over to you so that you can go through your talk because, yeah, that's what we're doing. And I'll be back around 10 minutes' time to ask you some questions. Everyone in the audience, if you do have any questions for Naomi, please pop them in the chat alongside your stream, and I'll do my best to ask after the talk. But now over to you, Naomi.
Thank you very much. Hi, so I'm Naomi Anderson-Subryan, and I am an illustrator, and I'm also a maker. Um, I am based in South East London, and I was also born here. And I predominantly work with paper collage, and ceramics. So here's a self-portrait, one I did a couple of years ago in collage, and then here's a recent one I did last year in ceramic. Now, before I became an illustrator, I actually studied to be an actor. And I went to drama school aged 18, but unfortunately I failed my first year at drama school. And so I spent a few years kind of lost, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I worked a retail job for nearly 4 years. And it was there that I met a lot of creative people who kind of convinced me to kind of get back into it and to put my creative energy into something else. And a friend of mine had done their foundation at Camberwell, and she said that I'd really, really enjoy it. And so I applied, and miraculously I got in. And that was when my love for illustration really began. I remember being on the foundation and sitting before we got to choose which pathway we were going to choose, listening to the talk from the head of illustration and just realizing for the first time that this was what I was kind of missing in my life. This was what I really wanted to do. All the things that I'd wanted to do with acting really had been a form of illustration, and it was there that really I I understood how broad illustration could be, and I realized that it was the path for me. And I'm so pleased to finally not be working a very boring retail job. And I went back when I was 23, so I remember being completely enthusiastic every single day to just get the most out of everything. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit now about my inspirations and how I come up with kind of my characters. My work is very colourful and it's full of expressive characters, and I'm going to just talk about where that kind of comes from. So firstly, kitsch. Kitsch is a massive inspiration for me. It's something that I don't think I really realised until my final year of uni was such a huge inspiration to my work. But it's been something that I've grown up with, and my mum was a massive collector of objects growing up. And so kitsch was this thing that I did my dissertation on, and I kind of followed the etymology of the word kitsch and how it kind of evolved through time from when it was first kind of used, its first documented use. And it was really interesting to see how the word has changed and how it means something different to everybody. And for me, it kind of sums up this feeling of nostalgia and familiarity. And a character that kind of features quite heavily in my work is this Marie Antoinette type character. And for me, that era and that sense of that regency and restoration is really where I see kitsch kind of living for me, in the bows and the frills and the flowers and the very excessive over the top feeling. That's where kind of kitsch lies for me. And I think it links to this idea of nostalgia, which is something that I try and create with my work as well. So this image I picked because for some reason it kind of gives me that feeling of nostalgia and familiarity. It feels like you almost know this character, but she's almost kind of, you don't know her. It's kind of somewhere in between the two things, and that's something that I really kind of like my work to kind of lie between the feeling of being familiar, but at the same time feeling completely different. So I picked this image for this idea of vaguely familiar because for me it kind of reminds me of Salvador Dali's Melting Clocks. But I remember when I posted this, loads of people said it reminded them of that TV show, the kids' TV show Blue's Clues. And so I really enjoy the fact that that sense of nostalgia and familiarity with the work is kind of it's interesting to see how people find their own stories and ideas within the work as well. And collecting. So I think this ties in with kitsch as well, and this idea of collecting that was really present growing up. But now, in my third year at uni, when I was at Camberwell, I started this collection because I was kind of interested in how collections have all these different stories and how they have all these things going on amongst them. And I continue to collect now. So that collection that I started is something that I now keep up. And here are some of my favourites. And here, just on the left there, is one of my most recent findings that I found in a charity shop, and it's a Victorian fairing, which is something that I looked at a lot in my final year, and it was a big inspiration for this third year project I did, which was based on this imagined collection that I created. I made all of the pieces, and it tells the story of the collection when it encounters this feather duster, and it was based on these very satirical little kind of almost staging pieces of Victorian satirical commentary, and it was kind of based on that idea. And I was inspired by this quote by Kantaro Potliakov. It says, "It feels like there are a million conversations happening between them," and that was kind of what I was looking at with that project, and this idea of creating and understanding conversations between objects and that relationship between them, and how putting two things together next to each other can instantly create kind of a conversation. Yeah, so theatricality again, like those Victorian fairings, it's like this idea of staging. So this was some illustrations I created for Pride and Prejudice, and I made all these ceramics which were based on the Wally dog, and I kind of made them my own, and I created 4 scenes, and it's still one of my favorite projects I did because there's something about it that does feel like a stage, and I think that ties back to kind of my background in acting and performance. Yeah. So theatricality and drama and kind of capturing a moment. And these Wally dolls are something that I continue to make, different characters. Um, and Pairs. Pairs is another ongoing project that I do, personal project, which is just kind of this idea, again, of familiarity that's crocodile tears. And yeah, I really like that sense of taking something that you know and then kind of switching it up a bit. So something that feels familiar, but how far you can push it into your own style. Animals, I think you can tell. I'm massively inspired by animals and kind of bringing their stories to life and giving them a voice, kind of usually quite comical voice. And yeah, film and TV. So again, it's the same idea of kind of taking something that's beloved and a specific characters that you may know from film and TV and bringing them into my own world again. So this one is Ghost World and then Queen's Gambit, and seeing how far you can push an idea in a form away from the original but still keep the kind of the integrity, but also bring yourself into that world and creating that visual language. And character, again, another movie there, that's Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I think for me, facial expression is one of my favorite parts when creating characters, because I feel like there's so many facial expressions and how much you can tell with facial expression and without any words was something that I think ties back to acting again. And I loved that part of acting, is how you could tell a whole story just with saying nothing at all, and how the kind of degree of the eyebrow can make such a difference to what the characters could be thinking or saying or feeling. It's really dependent. You can change an expression really easily that way. But then again, I do also like to use text in my work, and this was something that I think I shied away from quite a while, until in January of last year I did It's Nice That comics, and that was when I really started using the speech bubble to kind of tell again these stories between characters and between two things, and kind of creating these dynamics between my characters to add to the facial expression that I like to explore, and the kind of ideas of humor. And again, this is like the princess and the frog prince, and taking that idea and again twisting it, making it kind of a little silly, humorous. I'll talk a little bit about my process. So all my collages are made by hand, and I paint all the papers because color is super important to me. So I like to be able to really control the colors that I make and create the color palettes. materiality again, because I do ceramics, and I've also worked with felt, wood, found collage, paper mache. I think just that real connection to process and making with my hands is really important to me, and it's influences what I've done. Yeah, color. So I've talked a bit about how color is really influential. I'm always seeing color palettes in the clothes that I wear as well, which is that picture on the left. And it's really important for me to get the right color. So I do paint all of them myself. And then I think it's important because color can really kind of change the mood of something. And taking color out can also create completely different feeling. So this one is actually done in grayscale. I didn't change it on the computer or anything, but you can pick up certain moments and change the mood of a piece. Dynamic, again, something that I really think about in my process is how an image moves and how that you can create a real sense of dynamic movement. And so when I'm creating a piece, here's a quick process of what I'm doing, but when I'm creating a piece, you'll see on the next slide that I draw little thumbnails, and they're very small, normally 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. And I don't know why I like to draw really small, because a big page always really intimidates me. And I like to see how I can cram all that information into that one image. That's me just creating that collage there. So I use a piece of tracing paper and I stick all the pieces down. But yeah, here's some thumbnails from the It's Nice That comic that I did last year. You can kind of see the process there. And then usually I got an iPad, I think last year as well, and so I would draw up my sketch and play around with color before I make the final piece. And then again, you can see the difference between before it's scanned and then when I scan. I don't do much editing. I just maybe take away a few bits of glue or like hairs that sometimes appear on it, and sometimes just some strange kind of creasing that you get from where the paper warps from painting it. And yeah, with my ceramics it's similar. I either draw them up first and get a sense of kind of size and color, or sometimes they start out as a collage first and then I change them in, they become a ceramic, because I like to see the relationship between my characters and how they can live in the physical space as well as on a piece of paper. And then I'll just quickly talk about a few projects, mainly just to show my work in different contexts. So this was the It's Nice That comic that I did. And this was really influential, like I said, just that use of speech bubble and text. This was a piece I did for Who Gives a Crap, which was really cool. They sent me a whole bunch of loo roll and said I could create a piece with one of my characters, and I was really inspired by it. Kind of reminded me of like the 80s, and so I created this prom queen character, and I created a reel as well. Yeah, another thing on an Instagram-based piece was this Costa for Christmas just gone. This was for Trek magazine, which is an alumni magazine of the University of British Columbia. And this was a medical piece. It was about medical innovations, and that felt very alien to me. But it was really cool to get to learn and have a research-based kind of project where I could really learn about something I had no idea about and create these pieces that were kind of humorous, but also very serious in topic. Yeah, New York Times, that was a kind of a dream project for me, getting to do that. Very fast turnaround editorial, so I don't always feel like I get to do them as much as I'd like, just because my process takes a long time. Yeah, Rebel Girls, that was also came out last year. Got to do 2 portraits. And then clothing, yeah, this came out last year as well, New Works. These 2 prints from some of my collages. Then I was even lucky to do a ceramic commission, which never got used in the end, but that was really cool because often I don't get asked to do ceramics in a commercial field, so that was really fun. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to me. I think we'll go back and I'll see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Naomi. That was absolutely amazing. That was so interesting to listen to. We've had tons of questions from the audience, which is fantastic. I just had one very quick one first, though. You spoke about theatricality and staging and your acting background. And I guess when I look at your work, often there's this really amazing narrative storytelling element, even though, yeah, we're looking at kind of static objects and images. Do you sometimes think about what might have just happened to your character or what your characters might be talking about? Do you think about a bit of a story alongside it?
Yeah, I do. That's always something going on. I feel like they're normally like a captured moment, but I think the great thing when I did the comic was I had to kind of stretch that moment out, because normally I'm so I usually cram everything into one image and have all these little things kind of going on. So I do often think about it, and some of my characters kind of reappear, or they're not the same character, but they do feel like they're connected. And
Yeah,
but definitely, there's always lots going on in my head when I'm creating them, and I create backstories for them. Yeah, definitely.
fantastic. Catherine has asked, do you recall any childhood TV shows or cartoons, books or films that inform your work to this day?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of I grew up watching a lot of television, a lot of sitcoms when I was younger that were probably like totally not what I should have been watching. I watched one of my favorites. I remember this is a funny story because when you could take the hamster home from school
Oh
at
yeah.
primary school, and I remember I lost the hamster because I left the cage open because my mum said, "Oh, gimme, gimme, gimme's on." I don't know if you've ever seen Gimme, 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 but I liked sitcoms like that and Men Behaving Badly and things like that. And so I watched a lot of those kind of comedy shows and Shooting Stars, things that probably I shouldn't have watched, but I enjoyed watching. And yeah, in terms of books, I liked a lot of Tony Ross illustrations and Anthony Brown too, which are they've got a very dark feeling to them, but I love those books a lot. I don't know, there's something, the Hansel and Gretel I really loved, and the Piggy book, but that was one of my favorites. It was really subtle, and there's one page I really remember it was where the mum leaves and the dad is left with the two sons and they slowly turn into pigs. And there's this one page where the wallpaper, which was once flowers, becomes these little pigs. And I just remember loving
Oh
that
wow.
detail about how it subtly changed. That was, yeah,
That's
I did love
amazing.
that.
You've obviously got a very
Mm.
incredibly visual and a very, very good memory. Yeah, that's really
Yeah, I
interesting.
still have that. Still have that book. One of my favorites.
Awesome. Olivia has asked, outside of a university setting, have you got any tips for how to identify personal inspirations? I guess, when you're not forced to hit a deadline at uni, where can you look for inspiration?
I think that it's a really difficult thing is when you're actively searching for inspiration. I think as soon as you start saying, I feel uninspired, I need to find something, is when you start to clam up. So I think
Hmm.
I I like to think of it as what drives you. What are the things that you enjoy, because you can weave that into your work. What is it that you like doing in your spare time? What is it that makes you you? Because really you're kind of presenting who you are, but in a visual form to everybody else and how you see the world. So it's really about tapping into that kind of notion of who you are, which sounds a bit scary, but I know that really helped me. It was just kind of sitting back and going, okay, well, what makes me unique? What do I like? And how do I see things? And trying to kind of present that to other people. How can I explain how I'm seeing and understanding things in my brain, and putting that down, and that you'll find the connections. It might just click one day that you realize, oh, I like kitsch because I spent my childhood being dragged around boot sales with my mum, and
Yeah,
you can
nice.
find that connection quite easily sometimes.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Maybe one final question from Margarita. What's the best advice you ever received as a creative? It's a huge question, but yeah, is there any one piece of advice that kind of sticks out that you've been given? I don't know whether it was by a tutor or by a friend, another collaborator.
A friend of mine, when I left Camberwell, I was having to answer loads of questions about my practice and
Mhm.
doing kind of interview things, and I found it really intimidating and scary because I was like, "But what am I going to write? What if I change my mind?" And they said to me, "It doesn't matter. What you write in that moment was what you felt that day, and it doesn't matter if in a year's time you go, oh, I don't feel like that anymore, because we're always changing." And that was a really good piece of advice. It really helped me. It made me think, yeah, actually, this is how I'm inspired today, but in a year's time, I might be moved on and found something different. And that really helped me kind of feel more at ease and not feel like you're completely tied to this one thing you said in an article 10 years ago or
That's
something.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I think for any time of your career, absolutely. Okay, maybe one. I'll be sneaky and ask one final question because Noah asked a really good question. Could you tell us how you approach client briefs? I guess you touched on a couple there that you've done. One ceramics, yes, ceramics piece, but mainly I think it was in the illustration world. So yeah, maybe how do you approach client work in that field?
Um, it's difficult. I guess I would usually um, have an idea of what what they want and what I want, and I want to go a bit wild, not wild, but go completely in a slightly off kilter way. And so sometimes I'll go more to the extreme and then be brought back because it's easier that way, I think. And then they kind of tell you how to tweak it. But usually, if someone's coming to me, they understand that my process takes quite a long time. So usually, I'd start with very rough sketches by hand, like I showed you, and then I will draw them up on a computer and kind of give them idea of that sense of movement and idea of character, and then they'll approve it. And once it's approved, then I can go on to start making. But I would never start making a collage until I knew it was right because it's much harder to change
Right.
anything after that. But again, yeah, I try and take all the same inspirations that I have for my personal work and I bring that into my commercial projects as well because I feel like I don't differentiate too much between the two. The main difference is you're working with a client and they have a very specific idea and you want to make sure that they're happy and that they receive what they want, but also you're happy and that you create something that feels right for you. So that is always a difficult balance, but I try not to separate them too much because they're all my
Yeah.
pieces of work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best collaborations are where you're able to make something that you're really proud of and that obviously works for the brand as well. But yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Naomi. That was brilliant.
Okay.
And really appreciate you answering those questions. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but yeah, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Matt.